My father's coffin hadn't even touched the ground when my stepmother decided that was the perfect moment to erase me from his life. In front of 47 relatives, she stepped beside his grave, smiled, and announced, "Before everyone leaves, you should know the truth. Grace was never Wade's real daughter. The woman who watched my father raise me for 33 years waited until he could no longer defend me, then tried to steal my name, my memories, and everything he left behind." My stepbrother stood beside her and whispered, "Guess the ranch finally belongs to the real family." But then my father's attorney opened his briefcase. He pulled out a sealed envelope written in Dad's handwriting and said, "Wade prepared this in case this exact moment happened." And when my stepmother heard what my father had secretly discovered before he died, she stopped smiling. Because the biggest family secret buried that day wasn't mine, it was hers. But before I tell you what my father discovered, I want to ask you something. If someone who raised you, loved you, and stood beside you your entire life was suddenly called not your real family, would a DNA test change what they meant to you? Tell me where you're watching from and what you believe makes someone family, blood, or the person who never walks away. Because my father already knew his answer, and the letter he left behind was about to prove it. The strange thing about hearing someone question whether a man was really your father is how quickly strangers start looking for proof. They want documents, blood tests, paper trails, something official enough to explain 33 years of love. But nobody standing at that cemetery knew what I knew. They did not know about the nights Wade Callahan slept in a chair beside my hospital bed when I had pneumonia at 9 years old because he was afraid I would wake up scared. They did not know about the old blue pickup truck where he taught me to drive across the back roads of our ranch. They did not know about every sunrise we spent together checking fences before school. To everyone else, Wade Callahan was a successful ranch owner, a respected businessman, a man whose family name carried weight across half of Texas Hill Country. To me, he was just Dad, the first person I ran to when I was afraid. The first person who believed I could do more than anyone expected. The person who never once made me feel like I needed to earn my place beside him. My earliest memories were not of expensive things. They were of dirt roads, old boots, the smell of leather and hay, Dad teaching me that everything worth keeping required patience. People are a lot like land, Gracie, he used to say. If you take from them without caring for them, eventually nothing grows. I never forgot that. Callahan Ranch had been in our family for 3 generations. My grandfather started with 200 acres, a few cattle, and a belief that your handshake should mean more than any contract. By the time Dad took over, he had expanded it into one of the most respected ranch operations in the region. But he never cared about looking important. He still repaired broken fences himself, still remembered every employee's birthday, still stopped the truck to move a turtle out of the road. That was Wade Callahan. Strong enough to build something valuable, humble enough to never think it made him better than anyone. After my mother died when I was 8, everyone expected him to change. They thought he would bury himself in work, sell the ranch, send me away to relatives. But Dad did the opposite. He built his entire life around making sure I never felt like losing one parent meant losing 2. Every morning before school, he made breakfast. Usually terrible breakfast, burned pancakes, overcooked eggs, coffee that smelled stronger than gasoline, but he tried, and that mattered more. Every Saturday, he took me around the ranch, not because he needed help, because he wanted me to understand. This land is invaluable because our name is on the gate, he told me. It's valuable because people gave their lives taking care of it. When I turned 16, he gave me a small brass key. It opened the original ranch gate my grandfather built. I laughed. "A key? That's my birthday present?" He smiled. "Someday you'll understand." Then he closed my fingers around it. "This doesn't mean you own the ranch. It means you protect it." I still had that key the day we buried him. 20 years later, hanging around my neck under my black dress. The same key Marissa thought I had no right to carry. Marissa entered our lives when I was 22. By then, I was already helping Dad manage parts of the ranch while finishing my agricultural business degree. She met him at a charity event in Austin. She was elegant, confident, the kind of woman who knew exactly how to make people feel like she belonged anywhere. Dad had been alone for 14 years, and honestly, I wanted him to be happy. When he first told me about her, he looked almost embarrassed, like a teenager admitting he had a crush. "What do you think, Gracie?" I smiled. "I think Mom would hate seeing you eat frozen dinners forever." He laughed harder than I expected, so I tried. I really did. I welcomed Marissa. I helped her adjust to ranch life. I included her in traditions that had existed long before she arrived. And at first, she played her role perfectly. She praised Dad's kindness, said she admired what he built, said she wanted to be part of the Callahan family. But little things started changing, small enough that if I complained, I sounded unreasonable. Family photos moved from the living room into the hallway. My mother's old recipes disappeared from the kitchen drawer. The Saturday ranch drives became a good opportunity for Wade and Colton to bond. Always said with a smile. Always reasonable, always innocent. Colton was 15 when they moved in. Tall, confident, already carrying himself like someone waiting to inherit a kingdom. Dad treated him like a son immediately. He taught him horses, business, responsibility. But Colton was interested in the title more than the work. He liked saying, "One day when I run this place." But he hated waking up at 5 in the morning. He liked wearing the Callahan name. He just never understood what it cost to carry it. And Marissa encouraged that. "He's the future of this ranch," she would say. "He needs to learn leadership." Leadership, that word always seemed strange, coming from someone avoiding the hardest jobs. Over the years, the story slowly changed. People started calling Colton the Callahan heir, the next generation, the man who would continue the legacy. And me? I became Wade's daughter who helps with the paperwork. Nobody noticed I was managing supplier contracts. Nobody noticed I handled employee benefits. Nobody noticed Dad trusted me with every major decision. But Dad noticed. One evening, about 6 months before he died, he asked me to meet him at the old barn, the one my grandfather built. He looked tired, older, but his eyes were still sharp. "Grace," he said, "there may come a day when people try to convince you that family is about where you came from." I frowned. "What does that mean?" He looked across the ranch, the land turning gold under the sunset. "It means some people care more about roots they can brag about than roots they actually water." I didn't understand, not then. Then he reached into his pocket and handed me an envelope. "If something happens to me, trust Harold." My stomach tightened. "Dad, you're scaring me." He smiled, that same calm smile he always had when storms were coming. "I'm not planning on going anywhere." A pause. "I'm just making sure the right people are protected." I looked down at the envelope. "What people?" He touched my shoulder. "You?" 3 weeks later, my father was gone. And standing beside his grave, listening to Marissa tell everyone I was not really his daughter, I finally understood. My father had not been afraid of dying. He had been afraid of what certain people would do once he was no longer there to stop them. The morning of my father's funeral felt wrong before it even began. Not because of the grief. Grief made sense. Grief belonged there. What felt wrong was watching Marissa walk through our family home like she was already measuring where new furniture would go. Dad had been gone for 3 days. 3 days, and she was already talking about changes. "I think the old office needs a refresh," she told Colton while I stood in the kitchen making coffee. "Your father loved tradition, but the ranch needs a more modern image now. Your father, not our father, not Wade. Your father." The words were carefully chosen. Everything Marissa did was carefully chosen. Colton leaned against the counter, scrolling through his phone. "I was thinking we should update the entrance too." I looked up. "The entrance?" He nodded. "The old gate. The one with Grandpa Callahan's original brand." My grip tightened around the coffee mug. "That gate has been there for 70 years. "Exactly," he shrugged. "It looks 70 years old." I stared at him, because all I could hear was my father's voice. The land remembers who cared for it. Colton never understood that. To him, history was something you displayed when it made you look important, not something you protected when nobody was watching. "Dad loved that gate," I said. Colton looked annoyed. "Grace, you need to stop acting like you're the only one who knew him." That hurt, because the worst insults are the ones designed around your deepest fears. And my fear was exactly that after Dad was gone, everyone would slowly erase the parts of him only I protected. Marissa stepped between us, calm, elegant, always calm. Today isn't the time for fighting. Then she touched Colton's shoulder, not mine. We need to honor what Wade would have wanted. I almost laughed, because nobody in that kitchen had spent more time listening to what Wade wanted than I had. But I stayed quiet. That was my mistake. I had spent years believing silence kept peace. I never realized silence also gave other people room to rewrite the truth. The service started at 11. People came from everywhere: ranch workers, neighbors, business owners, families Dad had helped over decades. Men who looked like they had not cried in 40 years wiped their eyes when they walked past his casket. That was the kind of person Wade Callahan was. You did not have to be rich. You did not have to be powerful. If you needed help, he showed up. During the service, I spoke about the man I knew, not the businessman, not the ranch owner, the father. I talked about the burned pancakes, the Saturday drives, the way he carried dog treats in his truck because he never wanted a stray animal to be afraid of him. People laughed, people cried, and for a moment, I felt him there. Then Colton spoke, and everything changed. His speech was polished, perfect, almost too perfect. He talked about carrying the Callahan legacy forward, about protecting the family name, about becoming the man Wade prepared him to be. Prepared him. I looked down, because I knew what Dad would have said. A legacy is not something someone hands you. It is something you earn when nobody is watching. After the church service, we drove to the family cemetery on the edge of the ranch, the same land where 3 generations of Callahans were buried. The sky was gray. The wind was cold. The kind of weather Dad always called thinking weather. Everyone gathered around the grave. The pastor prayed. Aunt Ruth held my hand. And when the final words were spoken, I thought the hardest moment was over. I was wrong. As the casket started lowering, Marissa stepped forward. Before everyone leaves, her voice cut through the silence, I need to say something. A strange feeling moved through me, a warning, like hearing thunder before seeing the storm. Aunt Ruth frowned. Marissa, not now. But Marissa ignored her. She looked around at every person standing there, exactly the audience she wanted. For years, Wade protected a secret because he was a kind man. My stomach dropped. But kindness and truth are not always the same thing. She turned toward me, and I knew, before she said another word, I knew she was there to destroy something. Grace is not Wade Callahan's biological daughter. Silence, complete silence, the kind where even breathing feels too loud. Then the whispers started. What? That can't be right. Did Wade know? I stood frozen. My father's casket was still above the ground, and she was already trying to bury my place beside him. That's a lie. My voice sounded quieter than I wanted. Marissa gave me the expression she always used when pretending to feel sorry for someone. Oh, Grace. Like I was a child. Like she was helping me. I know this is painful. She pulled a folder from her coat. But facts are facts. She opened it. Medical records, DNA information, documents Wade kept hidden. Every word was another knife. He loved you. Nobody is denying that. A pause. But love does not change blood. Then she looked toward Colton. And this family legacy should stay with someone who truly carries the Callahan name. There it was, the real reason. Not truth, not honesty, ownership. Colton stepped closer, and the look on his face hurt almost as much as hers, because he believed her. Grace, he sighed, like I was the one making things difficult. Maybe Dad just didn't know how to tell you. Dad. The man he had spent years calling Wade whenever he was angry. Suddenly Dad was useful. I looked at him. You knew she was doing this. He did not answer. That was the answer. Aunt Ruth stepped forward. Have you lost your mind? Her voice shook. Wade is lying right there. She pointed at the casket. And you're fighting over money? Marissa's expression hardened. This is about protecting his legacy. No. I finally found my voice. This is about taking it. For the first time, her smile disappeared. Because I was right. But before she could answer, someone cleared his throat behind us. Everyone turned. Harold Mercer, my father's attorney. He had been standing quietly beneath the old oak tree, watching, waiting. He walked forward with a leather briefcase in his hand, the same briefcase I had seen in Dad's office hundreds of times. "Marissa," his voice was calm, too calm. "Wade told me there was a chance you might choose today." Her face changed, just slightly. "What are you talking about?" Harold opened the briefcase and removed a sealed envelope. My father's handwriting was across the front. My knees almost gave out when I saw it, because I recognized that writing immediately. Harold looked around at the family, then read the words written on the envelope. "If Marissa questions Grace's place in this family after I'm gone," he paused. "Open this immediately." Marissa went pale, because for the first time all day, she realized something. She was not exposing my father's secret. She was walking directly into the one he prepared for her. For a few seconds after Harold read the words on that envelope, nobody moved. Not Marissa, not Colton, not the relatives who had been whispering behind me only moments earlier. Everyone just stared at my father's handwriting, the same handwriting that had labeled my school lunches, signed every birthday card, written little notes, and left them on the kitchen counter whenever he had to leave before sunrise. And now, the last message anyone expected from Wade Callahan was sitting in the hands of his lawyer, still protecting me, even from the grave. Marissa recovered first. She always did. People like her survive by controlling the room, and she could feel control slipping away. "This is unnecessary," she said. Her voice was softer now, less certain. "We don't need to turn Wade's funeral into some legal performance." Aunt Ruth looked at her like she could not believe what she was hearing. "You announced his daughter wasn't his daughter while his casket was still above the ground." Her voice cracked. "You already made it a performance." Several relatives looked away, because they knew she was right. Marissa wanted an audience when she thought she was winning. Now she wanted privacy because she wasn't sure anymore. Harold held the envelope carefully. Wade was very clear. He looked at everyone. If this accusation was ever made publicly, his response was to be delivered publicly. Marissa's jaw tightened. "This is ridiculous." Then she pointed at the folder in her hand. "I have proof." Harold nodded. "I know." That answer stopped her, because she expected denial. She expected a fight. She did not expect him to already know what she had. "You know?" "Yes." He adjusted his glasses. "Wade knew about the documents you collected." The color drained slightly from her face. "He knew you requested old medical records." A pause. "He knew you contacted 3 attorneys about challenging Grace's inheritance before he passed." The cemetery went completely silent. I turned toward Marissa. Before he passed, Dad had still been alive. Still making coffee in the morning. Still asking about my day. Still calling me Gracie. And she had already been preparing for a war after he died. "You were planning this while he was sick." My voice barely came out. For 1 second, just one. Something like shame crossed her face. Then it disappeared. "I was protecting my son." There it was, the truth. Not protecting Wade, not protecting the ranch. Colton, always Colton. I looked at my stepbrother. He wasn't smiling anymore. For the first time all afternoon, he looked unsure. "Mom?" Marissa ignored him. "Open whatever dramatic letter you want." She lifted her chin. "But nothing changes biology." That word, biology. She said it like it was stronger than 33 years of bedtime stories. Stronger than every scraped knee my father bandaged. Stronger than every sacrifice, every memory, every moment. I wanted to scream. But then I remembered something Dad once told me. Never argue with someone who already decided not to hear you. Just let the truth speak louder. So I looked at Harold. "Read it." He studied my face, making sure I was ready. Then he broke the seal. The sound of the paper tearing felt louder than thunder. Inside were several pages, and another smaller envelope. Harold unfolded the letter. Then my father's words filled the cemetery. "To my daughter, Grace." My hand flew to my mouth, because hearing those words after everything Marissa said nearly broke me. Not my heir, not my responsibility. My daughter. If this letter is being read, it means someone has decided to use blood as a weapon against the person I love most in this world. Aunt Ruth started crying. Harold continued. "I wish I could say I'm surprised. But I'm not. Because people who don't understand love often try to measure family with things they can count. Money, names, DNA. But they never measure the things that actually matter. The nights you stay, the promises you keep, the people you choose when nobody is forcing you. I closed my eyes. It sounded exactly like him. Grace, before anything else, I need you to hear this. You are my daughter. You have always been my daughter. And there was never one day of your life when I questioned that. A tear finally slipped down my face. The tear I had refused to give Marissa. The tear I had held back since the hospital called me. Because this wasn't pain. This was my father reaching across a distance I thought was impossible. Harold kept reading. Yes, I know about the records Marissa found. I know why she believes they prove something. She found one piece of a story and built a weapon out of it. So now everyone gets the whole story, Marissa stiffened. Because she heard it too, the shift, the moment when her attack became his reveal. When Grace was 9 years old, after her riding accident, doctors discovered something unexpected during treatment. They found information that raised questions. So I did what any father would do. I searched for the truth. Not because I needed proof to love my daughter, but because one day she might need proof against someone who didn't. I covered my face, because suddenly I understood. Dad had known this possibility existed for over 20 years, and instead of letting fear change the way he loved me, he prepared. Harold removed the smaller envelope. Inside were official documents. DNA testing confirmed Grace Callahan is my biological daughter. Gasps moved through the crowd. But let me be clear, that is the least important thing written on this page. That test did not make her my daughter. Loving her did. The wind moved across the cemetery, and for the first time since Dad died, I felt like I could breathe. Then Harold stopped reading. His expression changed, because we had reached the part Dad wrote for someone else. Marissa. My stepmother froze. This next part is for you. She shook her head. No. Just one word. Quiet. Afraid. Because somehow, she already knew. Wade left more than a letter, didn't he? Harold looked at her, then reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small recorder. Yes, he did. Colton stepped forward. What is going on? Nobody answered. Harold pressed play, and suddenly, my father's voice returned. Strong, calm, alive. Hello, Marissa. The entire cemetery froze. If you're hearing this, then you decided to hurt my daughter after I was no longer there to stand between you. A pause. Then Dad said, so now it's time we talk about your son. Colton's face changed. My son? Marissa whispered. Turn it off. But nobody moved. Because after years of secrets, Wade Callahan was finally about to tell the truth. Hearing my father's voice again nearly broke me. For 3 days, I had been trying to accept that I would never hear it again. No more Sunday phone calls. No more random messages asking if my truck needed an oil change. No more early mornings where he knocked on my office door holding 2 coffees because he knew I had been working too late. And then suddenly, there he was, standing in that cemetery with us. Not physically, but in every way that mattered. The recorder crackled slightly. Then Dad continued. Marissa, I want you to understand something. I am not angry because you question DNA. I am angry because you believe DNA was the only thing that made someone worth loving. Nobody spoke. Even the wind seemed quieter. Dad's voice continued. When I married you, I accepted Colton as my son. I went to his football games. I taught him how to ride. I taught him the business. I stayed awake worrying about him the same way I worried about Grace, because that is what fathers do. I looked at Colton. The arrogance he carried for years was gone, completely gone. He looked like a little boy who had just realized the person he pushed away had been holding him up the entire time. Then Dad said the sentence that changed everything. But I also knew the truth. Marissa closed her eyes. Don't. It was barely a whisper. But Harold did not stop the recording. Because this was not revenge. This was exactly what my father requested. I knew Colton was not my biological child. A wave moved through the crowd. Shock, confusion, disbelief. Colton stepped backward. What? His voice cracked. He looked at his mother. Mom? Marissa opened her mouth. Nothing came out, and that silence answered before she could. Dad continued. I discovered the truth 5 years after we married, not because I was searching for a reason to reject him, but because medical information forced questions that needed answers. I confirmed everything privately, and after I knew, I made a choice, a pause. I chose him anyway. That was the moment Colton broke, not when he learned Wade wasn't his biological father, but when he realized Wade knew and loved him anyway. All those years, all those comments, all those moments Colton called himself the real Callahan, the true heir, the son who belonged. And Dad had just smiled through it. Knowing the truth, choosing kindness, every single day. Colton, Dad's voice softened. This part is for you. My stepbrother looked up, like he forgot the recording could speak to him. I know your mother told you the ranch would prove your worth. She was wrong. No land can do that. No last name can do that. Being a Callahan was never about being born into something. It was about becoming someone. Colton wiped his face quickly, trying to hide the tears, but everyone saw. You disappointed me sometimes. You were arrogant. You wanted the reward before understanding the responsibility. A small laugh came through the recording, a real Wade Callahan laugh. But you were also the kid who stayed up all night with a sick horse when you thought nobody knew. The kid who secretly paid one of our workers after his wife's surgery because you didn't want him embarrassed. The kid who had more goodness inside him than he wanted people to see. Colton covered his mouth. Because my father had seen him, really seen him. Not the version Marissa created, not the arrogant young man chasing a last name, not the boy who thought inheritance was proof of love. He saw the person underneath, and somehow, that made everything hurt more. Dad's voice continued. Colton, I know this may hurt. I know you may feel like your whole life changed in one sentence. But listen carefully. You did not lose a father today. You lost the illusion that blood was the reason I loved you. Aunt Ruth started crying beside me. Even Uncle Boone looked away. Because that was Wade Callahan. Even while exposing someone's lies, he was still trying to protect the person who might get hurt by the truth. The recording continued. Marissa, that is what you never understood. You spent years trying to convince Colton that Grace was standing in his way. But Grace was never his competition. She was his example. My stepmother looked like she wanted the ground to open beneath her. The same crowd she gathered to humiliate me was now watching her carefully built story collapse. You told people Grace was only important because I felt sorry for her. You told yourself Colton deserved the ranch because he was my son. A pause. But if blood is the only thing that matters to you, then by your own rules, neither of you understood this family at all. Colton lowered his head. Marissa whispered, enough. But nobody listened, because for the first time in years, she was not controlling the story. Dad was. I have attached all necessary documents with Harold. The DNA reports, the legal records, the trust amendments. Everything has been reviewed and finalized. That was when Marissa looked at Harold. What trust amendments? Her voice was different now, not angry, afraid. Harold reached into the envelope and removed another document. The Callahan Family Land Trust was updated 6 months ago. Marissa stared at him. You can't change a family trust without notifying beneficiaries, Harold finished calmly. You were notified. A pause. You just didn't read it because you assumed Wade would never make a decision without you. That landed harder than any insult could. Because it was true. Marissa had spent years thinking Dad was too kind to notice, too trusting, too easy to manipulate. She mistook kindness for weakness. That was her biggest mistake. Harold opened the document. Under Wade Callahan's final instructions, ownership control of Callahan Ranch transfers to Grace. My heart stopped. What? I looked at Harold. Even I didn't know. He gave me a sad smile. Your father wanted you to hear it with everyone else. Then he continued. Colton receives the education fund, investment account, and personal inheritance Wade created for him. Colton looked up, confused. He still left me something? Harold nodded. Quite a lot, actually. But Colton swallowed. He knew. Yes. And he still... His voice broke. Harold answered softly. Yes. He still called you his son. That was the moment Colton sat down on the grass. Like his legs simply stopped working. The weight of everything finally hit him. The man he had spent years trying to replace, the man he thought he deserved more from, had loved him more honestly than anyone else had. Then Harold reached the final section. There is one more condition. Marissa looked up. What condition? Harold read. If any individual attempts to challenge Grace Callahan's place in this family by using false claims, manipulation, or private family information as a weapon, that person forfeits any position connected to ranch management or decision-making. The silence afterward was brutal, because everyone understood. Marissa had triggered the very clause designed for her. She had not taken control of the ranch. She had removed herself from it. That's impossible, she whispered. Harold shook his head. It's legally binding. Wade hoped he would never need it. A pause. But he prepared it because he knew you. Those 5 words destroyed her. Not the money, not the documents. That. Because she realized Wade had seen the real her, the entire time. Then Dad's recording played the final part. His voice was softer now, tired. Almost like he knew this would be the last thing we heard. Grace, I looked at the recorder. I'm sorry. That broke me. Because he had nothing to apologize for. I'm sorry that someone made you stand here defending a love you should have never had to prove. I'm sorry I'm not there to hold your hand. But I need you to remember something. The ranch is yours. Not because you share my name. Not because a document says so. Because you understand what the Callahan name is supposed to mean. Take care of the land. Take care of the people. And if you can, take care of Colton. He may need his sister more than he realizes. I looked at my stepbrother. For the first time, I did not see the arrogant man who stood beside Marissa. I saw someone who had just lost the only father he ever had. Then Dad said the last words. I love you, Gracie. I loved you the first moment I held you. And I will love you long after I'm gone. The recording ended. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Because everyone came to that cemetery expecting to bury Wade Callahan. Instead, they witnessed him protect his family one final time. Marissa slowly stepped backward. The folder she had carried so proudly was hanging loosely in her hand now. All her evidence, all her planning, all her confidence, destroyed by one thing she never understood. My father knew the difference between blood and love. Marissa left before my father's casket was fully covered. That was the part people remembered most. Not the DNA documents, not the inheritance, not even the recording. They remembered that after everything Wade Callahan said, after hearing the voice of the man she claimed to love, she still walked away before saying goodbye. Her heels sank into the soft dirt as she crossed the cemetery, the same dirt my father spent his entire life protecting, the same land she had fought so hard to own. And somehow, she still never understood what made it valuable. Colton didn't follow her. That surprised everyone, especially Marissa. She stopped halfway to her car and turned around. Colton, her voice was sharp, the same voice she had used for years whenever she expected obedience. Let's go. For a moment, I saw the old Colton return, the boy trained to follow his mother, the boy who believed loyalty meant never questioning her. Then he looked at my father's grave. And something changed. No. One word. Quiet, but powerful. Marissa stared at him. What did you say? Colton swallowed. I'm staying. With them? She looked around the cemetery like everyone there had betrayed her. Like she was the victim. After everything. After what they just did to us? Colton looked exhausted. No, Mom, his voice cracked. After what you did. The silence that followed was heavier than anything Harold revealed. Because this was the one consequence Marissa never expected. She planned for lawyers. She planned for arguments. She planned for people choosing sides. But she never planned for Colton choosing the truth. I did this for you, she whispered. And maybe some part of her believed that. That was the saddest thing. People can hurt you deeply while convincing themselves they are protecting someone. You told me he loved Grace more because she was his real child, Colton said. You told me I had to fight for my place. He looked toward the grave, but he already gave me one. Marissa had no answer. Because Wade's love destroyed the lie she spent years building. She finally turned and walked away. Alone. The next few weeks were quieter than I expected. People think when a big truth comes out, everything immediately feels better. It doesn't. Truth is not a magic cure. Sometimes truth is the surgery. It removes what was poisoning you, but healing still takes time. I moved back into the ranch house, not because I wanted ownership, because it was home. But the first night there was harder than I imagined. Dad's boots were still by the back door. His coffee mug was still beside the sink. His old jacket still hung near the entrance. Everything looked like he might walk back inside any second, except he never would. I sat at the kitchen table until midnight, the same table where he helped me with homework, where we ate terrible pancakes, where he told me everything would be okay. And for the first time, I let myself fall apart. Not because of Marissa, not because of the inheritance, because after fighting to prove Wade was my father, I had to finally accept that he was gone. The next morning, Colton showed up. I saw his truck pull into the driveway. For a second, I considered pretending I wasn't home. Old wounds don't disappear because someone else suddenly understands they caused them. But then I remembered Dad's words. He may need his sister more than he realizes. So I opened the door. Colton stood there holding his old ranch jacket. The expensive watches were gone. The confidence was gone. Everything he used to hide behind was gone. "I'm not here for money," those were the first words he said. "I know." He looked surprised. "You do?" I nodded. "Because if you wanted money, you'd bring a lawyer." For the first time in weeks, he smiled. A small one, almost embarrassed. I deserved that. Yes, I didn't soften it. Because forgiveness built on pretending nothing happened is not forgiveness. It's avoidance. Colton looked down. "I hated you." Hearing it out loud hurt, even though I already knew. "Why?" He was quiet for a long time. "Because Mom made me believe you were the reason I didn't feel like I belonged." A pause. "But the truth is, I didn't feel like I belonged because I knew I hadn't earned it." That was the most honest thing Colton had ever said to me. She kept telling me the ranch should be mine. But every time Wade tried to teach me something, I treated it like I was already above it. His eyes filled with tears. He was trying to give me a father. And I was waiting for a fortune. I did not hug him, not yet. Some stories rush that moment. Real life doesn't. Instead, I asked, "What do you want?" He looked toward the barn. The place he avoided for years. "A job." I almost laughed. "You inherited enough money from Dad." "I know." "Then why?" He looked back at me. "Because he left me money." A pause. "But he left you the ranch." And I finally understand there's a difference. That sounded exactly like something Dad would say, so I gave him what Dad once gave me. A chance. Not an office, not a title, not control. A chance. Colton started at the bottom, fence repairs, morning feeding, equipment maintenance. The work he once thought was beneath him. The ranch employees were not easy on him. They remembered. They remembered every arrogant comment, every time he acted like their future boss. And now they watched him carry supplies and clean stalls. Some people would have quit. Colton didn't. That was when I started believing he might actually change. Marissa was different. She fought. At first, she hired attorneys. She challenged the trust. She claimed Wade was manipulated. But every road led back to the same problem. Wade had prepared for everything. The documents were clear. The recordings were clear. The evidence was clear. Eventually, her own lawyers told her the truth. There was nothing to take, because the ranch had never been hers. 6 months later, I received a letter from her. No return address. No apology. Just one sentence. "I hope someday you understand I was only protecting my son." I stared at those words for a long time, because even after losing everything, she still didn't understand. Protecting someone does not mean teaching them they deserve things they never earned. Love without accountability is not protection. It is damage. I put the letter away. Not because I forgave her. Not because I hated her. Because I was done letting Marissa decide how much space she occupied in my life. 1 year after Dad died, we held a small memorial at the ranch. No expensive event. No speeches about legacy. Just the people who actually loved him. Employees, neighbors, family. Colton stood beside me near the old gate. The brass key Dad gave me was in my hand. "You know," Colton said quietly, "I spent years wanting that key." I looked at him. "And now?" He smiled sadly. "Now I understand why he gave it to you." The old Colton would have hated admitting that. The new one looked relieved. Because he finally stopped fighting for something that was never the point. That night, after everyone left, I walked through the ranch alone. The sun was setting over the same fields Dad loved. And I finally understood something. Marissa thought inheritance meant receiving what someone owned. Dad knew better. Inheritance is carrying forward what someone valued. And Wade Callahan left behind something much bigger than land. He left behind proof that love is not measured by where you come from. It is measured by who chooses to stay. 2 years after my father's funeral, I found another letter. Not by accident. Because Wade Callahan never left important things to accidents. Harold called me on a Thursday morning and asked if I could stop by his office. The same office where Dad had signed contracts for 30 years. The same office where he had prepared the envelope that protected me when he no longer could. When I arrived, Harold was sitting behind his desk with a small wooden box in front of him. I recognized it immediately. Dad's old cedar box, the one he kept in the ranch office, the one I used to joke probably contained some great family secret. Apparently, I was right. "Your father asked me to hold this until you were ready." Harold pushed it toward me. How did he know when I'd be ready? A small smile crossed his face. He said I would know. Of course he did. That was Dad, still trusting people, still understanding them. Even after he was gone. Inside the box was a letter, a photograph, and the old ranch notebook my grandfather used when he first bought the land. The photo was one I had never seen. Dad was younger, maybe 25, standing beside my mother in front of the original gate. She was holding me as a newborn. On the back, Dad had written, "The day I became the richest man in Texas." I laughed. Then I cried. Because Dad was never talking about money. I opened the letter. "Dear Gracie, if Harold gave you this, it means enough time has passed. Long enough for the anger to cool. Long enough for grief to become something you can carry instead of something carrying you." I smiled through the tears, because somehow, he was right. I need you to understand something. What happened with Marissa was never your fault. Some people see love as a limited resource. They believe if someone else receives it, there is less available for them. But real love does not work that way. It grows. That was the lesson I tried to teach this family. I looked out Harold's window. The world kept moving. People walked by, cars passed. And it felt strange that my father could be gone. But his words could still stop time. The letter continued. "Don't spend your life proving you deserved my love. You never had to. You had it. That was never the question. The question is, what you do with the love you were given." I read that sentence 3 times, because for almost 2 years, I had been carrying something I didn't want to admit. A need to prove Marissa wrong. Every successful year, every ranch expansion, every compliment from employees. Some part of me was still trying to win an argument with someone who was no longer in the room. Dad knew, of course he knew. Protect the ranch, but don't let the ranch become a monument to pain. Fill it with new memories. That is how you keep people alive. The final line broke me. And tell Colton I'm proud of him. Not for becoming the man I wanted him to be, but for finally becoming the man he wanted to be. I folded the letter, and for the first time since Dad died, I felt peace without guilt. A few days later, I showed Colton. He read it standing inside the old barn, the same place where Dad tried for years to teach him lessons he refused to hear. When he reached the last sentence, he turned away, but not fast enough. I saw the tears. "He knew?" Colton whispered. "He knew I could change?" I nodded. "He was usually right about people." Colton laughed softly. "Except Mom." I thought about that, then shook my head. "No, I think he was right about her too." He looked confused. "What do you mean?" "I think he knew exactly who she was." A pause. He just chose not to let her choices change who he was. That was the difference between my father and Marissa. Marissa changed herself to get what she wanted. Dad stayed himself even when it cost him. Years passed. The ranch grew, not bigger. Better. That was something Dad would have cared about. We created programs teaching young farmers how to run sustainable businesses. We helped struggling families keep their land. We hired people who needed second chances, and eventually, Colton became someone Dad would have been proud of. Not because he inherited the Callahan name, because he finally earned it. One morning, I watched him teach a teenage employee how to repair a broken fence. The kid was frustrated, ready to quit. Colton just smiled and said, "Anything worth building takes patience." I froze, because those were Dad's words, the exact words. For a second, it felt like he was standing there again, boots covered in dirt, coffee in his hand, smiling because we finally understood. As for Marissa, I heard from others that she moved away. She never admitted what she did, never apologized, never called. And for a long time, I thought I needed that apology to move on. I didn't. Sometimes closure is not someone finally saying they were wrong. Sometimes closure is realizing their refusal to admit the truth no longer controls your life. I stopped waiting for Marissa to become someone she wasn't, and I started appreciating the people who chose to stay. Every year on the anniversary of Dad's passing, Colton and I visit his grave together. The first year, we stood on opposite sides. Two people connected by a man we both loved. Now we stand side by side, brother and sister. Not because a document says so. Not because DNA says so. Because Wade Callahan taught us something stronger. Before we leave, I always place my hand on his headstone. The words engraved there were chosen from his own letter. Love is not proven by blood. It is proven by showing up. And every time I read those words, I remember the day Marissa stood in front of everyone and tried to take my father away from me. She thought revealing a secret would erase 33 years of love. She thought family was something you could challenge in court, something you could measure in a lab, something you could steal. She was wrong. Because being someone's child is not only about where your life begins, it is about who holds your hand through it, who teaches you, who sacrifices for you, who chooses you again and again. My father's greatest legacy was never the ranch, never the money, never the Callahan name. His greatest legacy was showing two broken kids that family is not something you prove. It is something you build. And even after he was gone, Wade Callahan built ours one final time. And maybe that is the part I want people to remember most. Sometimes the people who share your blood can make you feel like a stranger. And sometimes the people who choose you, protect you, and stand beside you become the only family you ever truly needed. My father taught me that love is not proven by a last name, an inheritance, or a piece of paper. It is proven in the quiet moments when someone shows up with nothing to gain. So if you have ever had someone choose you when they didn't have to, or if you have ever had to walk away from someone who only valued you when they needed something, I hope you remember this. You are not defined by the people who question your worth. You are defined by the love you give, the strength you build, and the people who refuse to let you stand alone. And now I want to ask you something. If you were standing in that cemetery that day, watching someone try to erase a lifetime of love with one piece of paper, would you have forgiven Marissa? Or would you have walked away and protected the peace your father fought so hard to give you? Share your thoughts below, because somewhere out there, someone else may need to hear your story too.